Okay, I'm going to talk to you about Bram Stoker's Dracula today. This is a good passage to look at, I think, from a feminist perspective. Harker here is staying in Count Dracula's isolated castle in Transylvania. A sort of obviously typical Gothic setting there. He's isolated from everyday life, very, very vulnerable. And he feels overpowered by the Count and threatened by him. Has to write letters to his fiancée and his employer back in England, telling them that he has to stay in Transylvania another month. And so you remember at this particular point, Dracula has warned him not to go anywhere in the castle except in his own room. Of course, the protagonist lets curiosity get the better of him, typically Gothic there. Harker thinks he's okay because he's hung a crucifix above his bed, and then he goes to explore the castle, comes across this locked room and forces it open, and it's rather spooky inside, but he ends up falling asleep. We're not sure whether what happens at this particular moment is something that Harker dreams of, or whether it really actually happened. It's another one of the key features of Gothic literature, that blurring of boundaries between what's real and what might be imagined. Anyway, Harker is visited by these three beautiful women with supernaturally sharp teeth and voluptuous red lips that fill him with a wicked, burning desire. And just as one of these women bends down and places her lips against his neck, Dracula sweeps in, ordering them to leave. And the vampiresses are furious that they've been interrupted, so Dracula offers them a baby, a sort of a half-smothered baby, as some kind of appeasement. It's really, really gruesome stuff. Typically Gothic setting that's worth noting: the moonlight, the haunted rooms, the dust in the rooms, obscuring everything, and of course, and then it's dark as well because it's nighttime. We've got this room that Harker foolishly thinks will be okay, and he imagines it as a place where ladies had sat and sung and lived sweet lives whilst their gentle breasts were sad for their menfolk away in the midst of remorseless wars. We've got Harker's imagination really reflecting gender norms of the era. The era, of course, is the late Victorian era, 1897, really just a couple of years after Wilde was writing Importance of Being Earnest. So you'll know this, you'll recognise this as a time really when people's behaviour was kind of governed by a very strict moral code, and obviously led to some diversions and digressions here and there from what would be acceptable morally. And that's what the Gothic writing plays into that, of course. So we've got, he falls asleep. He's not sure whether he fell asleep or whether he actually woke up, or whether this was all a dream. That blurring, as I said before, that blurring of kind of what's real and what's imagined here is sort of quite classic Gothic stuff. And Stoker plays into those fears that, classic fears of somebody waking up and finding that they're not alone in the room. So it's all really kind of spooky, terrifying stuff. And these women are supernatural. They threw no shadow on the floor. So they're clearly otherworldly creatures, and that otherness is definitely accentuated here. The two of them were dark. They had high aquiline noses, that's kind of pointy noses, like the Count. So that kind of sense of them being somehow foreign there, with their dark, piercing eyes, almost red eyes, which obviously particularly spooky. And then one of them's got golden hair with eyes like pale sapphires. So the description of them is kind of quite attractive. And yet repellent at the same time. They've got these brilliant white teeth that shone like pearls, ruby, voluptuous lips, sapphire eyes, and so on. So there's an attractiveness there, but also there's a sense of kind of wickedness and repulsion here as well. I felt in my heart a wicked burning desire that they would kiss me with those red lips. So Stoker, you know, definitely playing into the kind of maybe hidden, suppressed sexual desires of his readers. And we might want to think at this particular point about you know, cultural stereotypes, these women being presented as that classic familiar stereotype of the woman as an immoral and dangerous seductress here. They're behaving cunningly and coquettishly, and these women have planned to initiate a seduction. So it's very unfeminine, conventionally unfeminine characteristic there. That their agency with this, their you know, all these characteristics that would have been frowned upon in a woman of the Victorian era. So yes, these familiar cultural stereotypes. And perhaps we might want to consider here as well whether Stoker assumes there's this assumed male reader here in the writing going on. And that's obviously something that you can read about in the critical anthology. You might also want to consider Laura Mulvey's theory about male gaze and whether Stoker is showing aspects of that as well in his description of these vampiresses. Anyway, they're bending over him, gloating, and he finds this, Harker finds this thrilling and repulsive. And the women actually, as you lick their lips like an animal. So again, this sort of rather, you know, othering of these women, almost like a kind of you sort of subhuman, animal, very animal-like. If you look at this description here, a sound, they make a sound that could never have come through the softness of human lips. Moving on to this second page, the extract. Their red tongue lapped. It lapped the white sharp teeth. So again, Stoker breaking gender expectations of women at the time, the othering of these women who act in a way that isn't socially acceptable, obviously because they're vampiresses. Very predator-like, aren't they? And then along with that, we've got Stoker perhaps exploring Harker's anticipation and his hidden desires here. It's as if these women have awakened some kind of latent carnal desires that have been dormant in Harker for some time. And then all that kind of, you know, there's that build up there, of potentially up to this climax of whatever these women are going to do to him. Very interesting if you have a look at how this particular moment is portrayed on film as well. You might want to look at that. Almost pornographic, actually. We've got this moment here which is interrupted, and the Count comes in a storm of fury, and there's all, of course, he's associated with demons and, you know, blazing hellfire, etc. But yeah, certainly the Count is very much in control, very much a figure of authority and power, and someone to be obeyed. He hurled the woman from him. Imperious gesture, etc. How dare you, back I tell you, etc., etc. So he's very much in charge, and these women are very much firmly put in their place. And then to cap it all, at the end of this particular extract, we've got these not only are these women very unconventional in their I guess their sort of sexual appetite, that there's also a bit of infanticide thrown in there too. So these women are appeased by this gift from Dracula of a half-smothered child. So it's the antithesis, isn't it, of the nurturing woman that might be expected in the Victorian era. And obviously this behaviour is bad and to be punished. So there's quite a lot that you can discuss about this in relation to feminist literary criticism, you know, the sort of female independence getting a strongly negative connotation, the cultural, familiar cultural stereotypes of the woman othered as the immoral and dangerous seductress, and then perhaps a bit of male gaze thrown in there too. Okay,